Deadly flooding triggered by heavy rains in West Virginia continues. The death toll there has climbed to 24, and sadly it is expected to rise. West Virginia's governor has declared a state of emergency in 44 of the state's 55 counties. Over 17,000 homes and businesses are still without power. Kris Van Cleave joins me now by phone. He is in Clendenin, West Virginia. Kris, what is the latest where you are?
But we still have some teams going door to door in this area here. There were a few areas they just couldn't get to yesterday. Now that the water has receded and they've been able to clear out some of the mud that was left behind in this area, crews are able to go and do welfare checks basically on the houses. They don't have any reports of missing people here. There are apparently a handful of reports of unaccounted for people across the state, which is why they continue to say that death toll could go above 24. Here in this county, we were talking to a woman who was standing where her living room used to be. There's absolutely nothing left of her house. It didn't just sweep away her house, it swept away her husband. It's just one of the many, many sad stories that we are hearing here. From a recovery standpoint, on Friday, there were 66,000 customers without power across the state. That number, as of this morning, was down to about 17,000. There's an army of workers out across this state, power crews, water crews, gas crews, trying to get all of those things back up and running for people once again in as much of the state as they can. There are some areas that are so hard hit that it's going to take some time before electricity and water, those things are back up and running. But
Kris, with so many people though without power and all of the damage that they're dealing with, what are they able to do in terms of shelter for their residents?
Well, there are several Red Cross. There are 3 Red Cross shelters and several other shelters. A number of churches have been taking people in, and I can tell you the volunteers are flooding into West Virginia from surrounding states, surrounding communities, setting up areas where they're handing out water. There are large water trucks here in Clendenin for people who need fresh water. And a lot of people are staying with friends. Many of these communities that have been hard hit are fairly small towns. So, people know each other and they've been taking in their neighbors. Greenbrier County, where the Greenbrier Hotel and Resort is located, that county has seen most of the deaths, at least 16 of the 24 from there. And the reports are that 15 of those deaths happened in one small town. And that was a town we were in yesterday. And the accounts were the water came so fast that it swept through low-lying areas, and there were a lot of elderly people who they think just didn't get out in time. It's really just heartbreaking story after heartbreaking story. What we do know is the scope of this is bigger than we initially had a sense for, Christine. One county alone is telling us they have 500 homes that were severely damaged or destroyed. The previous number we'd been given by the state was 100 homes statewide. So you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of homes around Clendenin, where we are, which, again, it's a town of only about 1,200 people. The emergency management director for the county told us he thinks there's at least 100 homes in this area that have been destroyed. So what we're going to learn as the damage assessments begin tomorrow is the scope of this across West Virginia is much bigger than we first thought. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people left homeless by this flood, this worse than at least a century flood, at least 24 people dead, and many people waiting for lights and water and just the basics of life to get back. And I can tell you there are hundreds of roads in West Virginia that have been damaged or washed away. Some still have standing water that the National Guard has had to use giant trucks to get through.
Kris, I'm just curious, in your conversations with some of the residents, was this a situation that they were just completely caught off guard?
So what we hear, keep in mind, this type of flood, they say, is the worst in at least a century. So virtually no one alive today in West Virginia can tell you the last time they saw something like this. So, people, the family we talked to today who lost a loved one, they live along Jackson Creek. Typically, the creek is something you can walk over. So, and they've said, we've seen flood before, and we had talked about that, but it would, maybe come into the yard, and then their homes are gone, or their homes were completely submerged. I mean, a completely different level of flood than anyone expected, anyone had ever experienced. So they knew there were flash flood warnings in effect. They knew the rain. Obviously they sat through the rain, but when the flash flood started, you're talking minutes between a little bit of water and death.
Very heartbreaking situation there, Kris. We'll be checking in with you throughout the afternoon. Thank you for that report.
Sure thing.